Okay, we'll declare the council meeting open for Tuesday the 4th of June 2019. Just be aware that the meeting is live streamed and the video will also be publicly available on YouTube. So if we could remember to speak clearly one at a time and into our microphones, and also to avoid mobile phones ringing if possible. So calling for apologies. Yes, so moved by Councillor Clout and seconded by Councillor Granger. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against, so that's carried. And now into the public forum. We've got three speakers today. Samuel Taylor, Youth Member of Parliament, Alan Northcote on the Welcome Bay Supermarket, and Daryl Wesley on the impacts of potential marijuana legalisation. So first up is going to be Samuel. So welcome, Samuel, and I believe that you just did remarkably well on a test to enter Harvard with a score of about 100%. So maybe you can tell us a bit about that as part of your presentation. I think we'd be very interested. Thanks, Samuel.
Gosh, clock's ticking. Okay, well, good morning everybody. E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā karangatanga maha, tēnā koutou katoa. As said, my name is Samuel Taylor. Unfortunately, I'm not yet a Member of Parliament, only a mere Youth Member of Parliament, representing Todd Muller in this year's Youth Parliament in Wellington, so that makes me the Youth MP for the Bay of Plenty. There are a lot of really great youth MPs around the Bay. There is Ben Sakimi representing Simon Bridges, Michaela Wadsworth representing Angie Warren-Clark, and Nolene Tefakara representing Jan Tinetti, and then also Joy Mitchell representing Clayton Mitchell. So there's a really good bunch of people from the Bay of Plenty representing our area as the Rangatahi youth. So it's quite exciting. Wow. The problem is, right, because the Youth Parliament itself is actually not until July. So until then, I've mainly been doing stuff with Todd in the local area, just joining him at events, kind of like work experience. I must be the most annoying apprentice you've ever had on a job. But so there's not too much to talk about. I had the pleasure of attending a few events with him earlier in the year. I joined him at our Pride picnic down on the waterfront. There have been some fantastic things I've been with him at. But I thought I might tell a bit of a funny story to start with, because just after I found out that I was a youth MP, that Todd had selected me, my great aunt actually told me that one of my many great uncles had also been a real MP representing the district of Bruce in the 4th, 5th and 6th real parliaments. And I did some research, as one would do if they found out their ancestor was an MP, and I found a research paper written at the University of Waikato, and I thought I might read the conclusion to you because it's quite funny. Murray was a remarkably opinionated man who never ceased presenting his opinions on a wide variety of issues despite the notable lack of enthusiasm he roused. It was noted by many that his proposals, although presented as being for the good of the community, would also benefit him and his brothers in particular. When not promulgating his ideas on how to improve the world, he concentrated on developing new farms successfully, with mining investment being a very minor interest that brought him no profit. Unavoidably one of the most notable people in every district he lived in, he failed to charm most people. I will try my hardest not to live up to my famous ancestors' legacy. I'm aware of the clock, and I'd like to leave some time for questions this time, because I know I went 10 minutes. I was actually quite surprised to be invited back after the last disaster, but thank you very much for having me again. Being a youth MP has been a long time thing I've been interested in. I'm a very political person by nature, if you can't tell by the many times I've shown my face here. And I've been a member of a political party for some years now, and so it was, funnily enough, I actually applied for Youth Parliament last time around when I was 13, and they said, no, go away, you're too young, which cut really deep, actually. But I came back when I was 16, and thankfully I got in. There was a public election, and I won by a margin of about 18 votes in the end, and with over, I think it was 2,000 votes cast in the end. It was certainly a close thing, but it was very exciting to win that. And since then I have been representing the youth of the Bay of Plenty. And it's been a really good opportunity to kind of understand the issues that youth are facing in our area. And I think there is obviously, you've heard me talk about it before, there's a lack of engagement, that real issue with civic engagement. Obviously transport and housing are both big issues. No museum, all that kind of stuff. But sorry, museum joke, can't help myself. But yeah, it's given me a lot of perspective on what the issues that youth facer in the area beyond what I already had from my own involvement. And I'm really looking forward to being able to represent those issues and represent the views of Tauranga youth in this year's Youth Parliament in Wellington, where I'll be giving a 3-minute speech in the legislative in the House of Representatives itself. So it's very exciting, but I probably won't ramble on for too much longer because I wanted to leave some time for questions, so please have at me.
Well, congratulations. Just first of all on the your SAT scores. I guess that makes you the smartest person in the room, which is great. Just the question is, how do you think that we can help the youth of Tauranga increase their voting percentage this election in October?
Well, I don't talk about the SAT scores too much, or I might go to my head. At the moment, the council is doing some fantastic, because I'm on the youth advisory group for the council, and so we've been working with, obviously with Paul, with the comms team at council to be developing a youth voting platform. But I think possibly one of the most important things that councillors themselves and council candidates can be doing is making overtures to reach out to youth to get into their schools. I mean, admittedly, no young person is super excited about hearing a councillor come and talk to them, but I genuinely do think that is the best way to break through, is to be able to go out there and say, look, put a face to the name. This is who I am. This is what I will do for you and for our city in the future. This is why you should vote for me. I think that's the best thing on an individual level that councillors can do to engage with young people, is to actually make overtures to them and try to get to know them. In a more general sense, I think that the council is running some really effective campaigns this year, especially through our youth organisations, youth advisory group and that. I think some of the campaigns hopefully will be really effective in getting youth voting.
I've got Councillor Stewart and Robson, and if time, Councillor Malloy.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam, for coming back. Is mental health and drug issues also high on the mind of the youth when
Yes,
you go to Parliament?
without a doubt. Mental health is one of the biggest issues, and that will be one of our select committee topics when we're down there.
Morning, Sam. I understand your SAT scores place you in the top 2%, so welcome to the elite. I think the biggest issue facing any representative, and I'm interested in your view on this, is actually establishing what the people you represent believe, need, want, understand, and informing them. Is that a challenge for you? I mean, what resources do you get to go around the youth of Tauranga? I noticed that our youth advisory group seems to be cut from a particular tranche of Tauranga's youth, or the ones that presented in here last time, and I just wonder how you go about getting the view of all youth, or a proper cross-section, or a representative sample. It must be a challenge.
I'm going to leave the 2% comment aside because it's a little bit smaller than 2%, but that's all right. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. But yeah, I do agree. It is hard to get a very representative view of Tauranga's youth, because obviously I'm a lot more engaged than the average youth. You know, most youth don't care about council. I seem to be here every week. But and you're right, some parts of the youth advisory group, and especially the ones that presented, did represent a small slice of our community. They were mostly high school students, mostly white. You can take out whatever of those groups you want. But I do think even being in a school environment has given me a really good look at how the youth of Tauranga work. And obviously I get the perspective of the more engaged, if you will, but because I serve on the board of trustees at our school, I've got a really good perspective on the students who aren't doing so well at school and who need the help. And I'm actually really lucky because our school was recently named one of the 10 most equitable in the country, so I get a really good perspective from all angles and the work we're doing to make sure that everyone gets a fair go at our school. But from my work in the youth advisory group, from my work on the board, I've got a really good, I think I've got a really good perspective of what the youth of Tauranga need in a general sense. It is a hard thing, though, to understand what they need when you're representing them like that, absolutely.
Oh, Sam, well done. Welcome here. And thank you. Oh, no, congratulations on your stats. Hey, as a young man, he's keen, he's going to go to America. He's keen on that. What do you think of the American president? Is he a genius or is he an idiot?
That's a bit of an unfair one. You can't lay that one on me. No. Oh, it's a tough one, right? It's hard to criticise someone doing arguably the hardest job in the world from my very small perspective on him. I wouldn't have voted for him at any stage, primaries or national election. But I think character-wise, you can criticise him. But I don't necessarily think the job he's been doing is absolutely terrible. I think some elements of it are appalling. I think some of the work he's done with equality for LGBTQ plus people and in the wider space, I think that's really disappointing. But I think economically, he hasn't been doing an awful job. So there are wins and losses there. But that was an unfair question. I feel targeted.
Thank you very much, Sam, and no doubt we'll see you again in a week or so.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, our next speaker is Mr. Alan Northcote. Welcome, Alan. Yeah.
Mayor Greg and councillors and others here, I just need to explain first of all, I have essential tremors, so I come on pretty intense. With regard to the supermarket at Welcome Bay, I'll say first of all, very strongly, that I believe it is not council's business to promote a major organisation in commerce to go in and collapse practically the small business community in Welcome Bay. It is unethical. It is not council's business. Now, with respect to council-owned land, this is land that is held under trust under the Reserves Act. There are 3 reserves in Welcome Bay, all conjoined. The first one is the Welcome Bay Hall, half an acre, 2,025 square metres. Immediately behind that, there is another reserve that covers the Welcome Bay Community Centre and the Plunket. The rest of the land, including the children's playground and the green land around and above it, is a recreation reserve, a local. So if we look at, it goes quickly through to the pictorial stuff about 3 papers over. Can you see there the Welcome Bay Hall site? That's an aerial shot of the Welcome Bay Hall. Immediately below the hall, on the left behind it, is the Welcome Bay Community Centre, ex-Baptist Church. And to the right, immediately behind that line of cars there, is the Plunket. To the left of the Welcome Bay Hall site is on the road frontage a small parking area, and then behind that the children's playground, and next to the hall site a skate bowl. Now, to the right of the hall site we've got the service station, and behind that the vehicle service centre. And over to the right there we've got the edge of what is called the Welcome Bay Village. So if we turn over from there to the next page, we've got the Waitaha Reserve with the Welcome Bay Hall tucked in the top right corner of it. So you can see now in the smaller scale what I was talking about, in that the small parking area on the left at the front of the road, through to the children's playground and the skate bowl, and then above that, coming down the page, is a half netball court. And then we have contoured land up to the top right-hand corner. Now, getting off Waitaha Road is an absolute no-no because you've got a rise of 17 metres up to the top right corner, and cutting anything in there would leave on, it's a bit of a pudding, that land. You would have far too high cliffs to prop up under earthquake and whatnot. That would be a no-go. Coming from the other side, opening up the back there from the front, you would be destroying the three buildings, the Welcome Bay Hall and the community centre, and plunk it as extra parking for a supermarket. And in the back there, if you cut out a shelf there to put side by side a supermarket and reconstructed community facilities, you've still got a very high wall on the upside, and you've got several million probably of cost to council with respect to the reconstruction. Now, right through, council have said this could only be done if there was no loss of service. Going back to the front pages there, where I've already sent you a letter dated 5th and then 12th of April, I've said there that this would compromise severely the community activities as detailed overleaf and severely compromise Welcome Bay business and the village as a whole. On the next page there, I've entered on, since I sent to you, the fact that in any temporary measure, while reconstruction was done, only half, 7 out of 7 of the 14 sessions in the Welcome Bay Community Hall could be possibly accommodated out of sight a kilometre away at the Selwyn Ridge School. The other 7 would be wiped, they'd be gone. So in relation to the commitment of council, I say this is where council stops. You've committed to seeing no loss of service. That is an impossibility to achieve in the short term, let alone in the long term. I think we should now go completely to the, in regard to the, I have to shortcut there, there's a 3-page thing there that was an address that couldn't be accommodated at all but in the time available. And there's notes there that you should consider. In regard to the form of the survey, there was a commitment on the form and in resolutions that there would be this commitment to see no break of service and perhaps relocation in Welcome Bay. You have seen from that photograph of the small scale one, the Waitaha Reserve one, you can see less than 300 metres on that frontage. That is Welcome Bay community and business area, just 300 metres of it, that's all. On the right hand end you can see the church, and behind the village, which is in the middle there, you've got the tavern and their buildings. When council are talking about going to other sites outside council reserves, they took it in plural. Obviously that is either the tavern or the church. Both council were talking about and talking to these people. That's quite obvious from the publicity the council themselves have made. Now we've got absolute inconsistency when we come to the press reports with respect to the commitment to council. With the one on the Weekend Sun of the 18th of April, we've got 3 times a statement with respect that the community will have the final say. We've got a suggestion up on the top right that there could be a lease of council land. There's no way you can lease for a supermarket, council the land that's under the Reserves Act. Absolutely no way. So there's inconsistencies with the public statements. We've got to shortcut now to the back pages, final matters and recommendations. There was misinformation given on the form for the survey with respect to the quite misleading encouragements. There will be no loss of service or it could be relocated elsewhere with Welcome Bay. I've demonstrated quite clearly there's nowhere you can do that. 9 councillors have failed to recognise their responsibilities as trustees of the 3 reserves for the benefit of the beneficiaries. With respect to changes under the Reserves Act, this has to go to the Minister. The Minister gives the final decision, not the people of Welcome Bay. They can make submissions. You know perfectly well what's going on with regard to the Waikato University. Why expose council you serve to ridicule? But the major aspect I'm concerned with in regard to, under the Reserves Act, you haven't got a show of getting a supermarket on council reserves land, not a hope. With respect to the business at Welcome Bay, council have ganged up in bringing in a major player in the grocery order to smash the small business community of Welcome Bay. That's the most unethical thing that I've ever heard any council do anywhere in New Zealand. I'm sorry, my time is up. But this council is a shocker. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Northcote. We probably haven't got is there any question? It'd have to be a quick one if there is. Okay, Councillor Robson, just a quick question.
Alan, thank you for the presentation, and I think your points are well made. Would you be in favour of a supermarket if it was on private land? In other words, if council weren't involved, do you think there is a need for, and would you support the private sector engaging with the private sector to deliver a supermarket to Welcome Bay?
I think the way council have gone about it and organised dealing with private land for a supermarket is absolutely unethical. As far as this should have been something that supermarket people do for themselves, but instead it's been brought in as an electioneering thing improperly, in my view, in 2016. Council should be aware of what they should and should not do in electioneering. That was most unethical. Council have meekly fallen in behind that and acted as a gang to do everything they could to bring a supermarket in there and squash the business community at Welcome Bay. You're a shocker.
Okay, I think we take the point. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Northcote. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
And our final submitter, or speaker rather, in the public forum is Mr. Darryl Wesley. Welcome, Darryl. Well, you can if you, but as long as you press the microphone, that's all. Yeah, that's the main thing. Yeah.
That's all right.
Perfect.
There we go. Yeah, no, I can start. I really like your picture because that's quite an inspiration. Because for me, I'm here as a Kiwi. I really, really love this country and I'm very, very passionate about it. So this subject is dear to my heart, but I'm also a health professional working in the addiction sector. I've got easily over 10 years experience. I could go back further to my school days in the 80s, but I won't. I could tell you many things. I've had friends in the drug sector, and one of the people who poured most help into my life was an ex-heroin addict from the Mount, and that was in Mr. Asia drug days. So, yeah, so that's where I come to you from. Hey, I am not against medicinal marijuana or cannabis in any way, shape or form. If we can tabletise that and issue it in a cheap form through our pharmacies on script, all for it, because I think then we know what we're taking. I think what I really like is I look at your picture there, and I surf, and it will be a really, really sad day if I go for a walk on a Saturday morning to the beach, and instead of smelling the beautiful aromas of this beautiful land, the first thing I smell is dope. I tell you, I will be more than gutted if that happens. And the reason I say that is one of my team has just come back from the US of A on a holiday in California, and she has a family of 4, and this was just at Christmas time. They went to all the touristy spots, so all the good areas. So they flew into San Francisco, drove a car down to LA. What did those 4 children, the youngest being 8 years old, learn when they were in America? They learned to recognize wherever they went, they could smell marijuana, because I tell you, that is the fact. I was just talking to a nurse friend the other day. She led a school trip to Vancouver, and what did she come back and say? They could not believe what they saw, the number of people that were stoned downtown and the prevalence of cannabis everywhere. By the way, it's supposed to be banned in public places, and that's what the cabinet paper is saying here. How do the police control that? That's one of my first questions I'd like to throw out there. And so, so you've heard a little bit about that, and we hear that we want to follow the Canadian model. What a wonderful model. They legalised in October. What we're now seeing in Canada is that their incidence of drug driving rates have increased. They have had 327% increase since October in first-time users of cannabis. Doesn't look like it's a lesser thing. It looks like it's increasing to me, and I will go on. But, the proponents of this, what I'm struggling with is the proponents are telling us that it will reduce organised crime, it will give us an ability to regulate and control, it will not liberalise. But when I look at the evidence, and if anybody here can give me the evidence that would say otherwise, I welcome it, because I cannot find it. Wherever I look, we go from Colorado to Oregon to Vancouver and any of the other places that have legalised this product for recreational use. I cannot find one bit of evidence that supports what Ross Bell and Chloe Schwarbrook are saying through the media, as well as people like Andrew Little and Jacinda Ardern. Jacinda Ardern was asked the other day, what do you think? She said there's many reasons why we should legalise and only some why we shouldn't. I'd like to see where she's getting her information from. I'll go on. See, one of the things that I think many of you can relate to, I'm 51. In the 1960s, cannabis had a THC content of 0.3%. By the 1980s, it had a THC content of around 3%. That was when I was at school. And then by the 2000s, it had a THC content of around 5%. Well, ESR in New Zealand, and you can get this off the New Zealand Drug Foundation's website, they had a little bit of a fiddle, and they could grow plant matter, just standard plant, at anywhere from 9 to 12% THC. When they hydroponically grew it, it wasn't hard to do, try 30% THC. The reason these numbers are important is that the CBD content has stayed roughly at 0.4%. What we know about CBDs, that's where all the health properties of cannabis plant is, and there are some health properties, I'm not denying that, hence why I'm for medicinal, but if those numbers are out of sync, in order for CBDs and THC to be together, those two numbers need to be very, very close. Otherwise, what happens is the THC content, when it gets really high, the CBDs cannot mitigate the harm psychologically and what it does to people's mental health. So when we talk about a product that was sold in Colorado last year legally, just green plant by the way, 42% THC, CBD content of around 0.4%. You ask me, what is that going to do to your bus stop outside here? What is that going to do to downtown Tauranga? And what is it going to do for you and me? Well, I'll tell you what it's going to do for you and me. The first thing you're going to see is that we're going to have an increase in fatal road accidents, which are drug-related. Last year, we had the first time ever in this country that drug-related fatalities outweighed alcohol-related fatalities. We all know our road toll's really bad. We all know in the Bay of Plenty it's not flash at all. Why do we want to legalise cannabis when it's going to hit that first? And by the way, I don't want my daughter or my son or my mother or my father to be taken out by somebody who's high on cannabis after we legalise this product. What concerns me is that many people in this country are ill-informed, uninformed, think they're voting on the 1960s style Cheech and Chong cannabis, and if they were, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. I couldn't give a rat's. Why? Because the two of those numbers were very close in sync. This is what the New Zealand public are not being told, need to be told, and that's why I really appreciate it when Greg Brownless welcomed me to come here. You know, I'm not the fun police at all. I'm not here to take away fun. But mate, we are talking about a product that has massive potential for harm. The other things we've found overseas, we're told that it would lower crime. No, it doesn't. Crime goes up. Mental health admissions to our hospitals go up. Suicide attempts go up. Do we want that here in Tauranga? I've got to ask you, is that what we want when we legalise cannabis? Because that's what you and I will be voting on. I'll finish with this. A police officer was asked recently, what do you think of cannabis? This is what he said. It takes away people's hope in tomorrow. It takes away people's hope in tomorrow. If that's true, man, we need to tread with absolute caution, because the Chloe Schwarbricks of this world, and she's a lovely lady, I think she's really misinformed when it comes to cannabis. Thank you very much.
Councillor Granger, Stewart and Baldock.
Thank you, Daryl, and thanks for a very, very strong presentation here. Would you have the same strengths as this presentation with alcohol?
Yep, I think alcohol is a real worry. Absolutely. Like, why is it that somebody says to me when I've been working with them one-on-one, they go, Daryl, it used to be that I'd drive home, and this impacts me as well. When I drive home, there used to be just 2 liquor stores. Now I have to pass 4. You know, when we increase accessibility, problems go up. We all know what happened when we reduced the age from 20 to 18. Jenny Shipley's gone on record, that's the biggest regret of her political career. She wished like hell she never did that, you know?
Thank you for coming in today, Daryl, and giving us your presentation and the good information. It's ironic that central government are pouring money into mental health and then wanting to legalise cannabis. My question is, where else are you going to let people know this information?
Well, I think this has been my first opportunity, so I'll be honest, I have spoken on Mike Hosking's breakfast show and a few things like that. That will probably continue. Yeah, I just really want to get the message out there. I have talked to a few of the local MPs, and they're quite up for a forum with both sides presented. I'd absolutely welcome that, because like I said, I cannot find any evidence that backs up what the purported supporters of this, or what they say the pros are. I cannot find it. Organised crime, by the way, does not go down. It goes up. That's what they're saying. We will be able to take it away from the gangs. It does not happen. You can tax this product. The more you tax it, you increase the black market. We've seen that with tobacco products. It's a really fraught thing. By the way, I do have an MBA. I do get business. I totally understand the commercial side of this. I get the medicinal side. I get all that. But man, you talk to the guys from Hikarangi Cannabis, which I have, you talk to Helios, they all say, hey, we're just into medicinal. I hope they're telling us the truth, because what we've seen overseas is these companies vanished and they turned into recreational companies instantly. I didn't even tell you about the edibles. I only spoke about plant. Edibles, and that's in the cabinet paper released on the 7th of May, we will welcome edibles. Canada's not so sure. That means we could have gummy bears and products at 90% THC, and I'm not kidding you. There's a product called Glass. Looks like this. It's a resin form. 99% pure THC, mate. You take that, that will more than bend your head. I nearly swore then. You know, like seriously, people need to be aware what it is that we could open the door to. This is what Chloe and co do not talk about. I don't know if you saw an interview with her recently. When the gummy bears came up, she went, oh hell. You know, she just, oh, we don't want to talk about that. Because it's a reality. Do you know what's happening in America? People can't finish the gummy bears because they're so strong, and then their dogs come along and eat them, and they are dying. This is a fact. You know, vets now, when you have a sick dog, one of the first things they do in California is a toxicology test for drugs. Welcome this into Tauranga, guys, and that's what we'll get. You know, like, think about it. It will affect you and me in a major way, and let's hope it isn't by a car accident.
A final question, Councillor Baldock.
Thanks, Darryl. I hope you get a wide audience somehow. You're doing a
Thank
great
you.
job. One of the problems for my generation probably is what you touched on, that we were probably using, 1.5% or something, and we all thought it was great, and we had a lot of fun and so on. We don't understand what's coming. How do you get to us? The young people are misinformed to a large extent, but we're the ones probably that are going to vote in this thing. So, do you have strategies for doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like at the moment, I'm here as an individual, okay? So if there's any media head, do not put who I work for in the paper, okay? Now, the organisation I work for are about to release their policy. We all know in the corporate world you don't want to jump the gun, okay? I'm speaking as a person who works as a health professional in the addiction sector at this point in time. I'd love to be able to put the name of the organisation right next to me. One day I'm pretty confident I'll be able to. So yeah, in answering your question, Larry, I think, like, I have talked to the principal of Otamoto College because he came out strongly in the paper when Greg did, and said this is not something I welcome. And he's open to organising a forum because he's government, he's got to have both sides. I'm up for that. Like, a local Labour MP said to me when I had 2 hours with her, she conceded at the very end when we really pushed her on it, mate, we're in bed with the Greens, what other option do we have? She conceded that if we legalise, harm will go up. She said that to me. She said, we know harm will go up. And I said, so why are you doing it? Because you can't guarantee how long that spike of harm will last for. If Colorado, Oregon and places like that see anything to go by, it stays up. You know, it does not go down. So you're left with a worse predicament than we have now. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Darryl, for coming in. When Darryl came to see me, why we thought it was a good idea that he spoke was that one of the angles was that, of course, government passes legislation, and then the next thing they require councils to do something, such as where, for example, this could be sold. We then are told we can't ban it completely, but we have to pick where it's sold, and then we're told that we're allowing it to be sold. You know, I mean, this is the crazy world in which we live. So I wanted Darryl to come and just speak on from that point of view, and we've had that with a number of other pieces of legislation, everything from freedom camping to whatever else, where we end up being the bad guy. And this, of course, is a case for central government to decide.
Can I just comment on that? What we've also seen overseas, to do with what Greg said, guess where the shops will end up? They'll all end up in places like Maryvale. The evidence is strong because they don't have the ability sometimes to be able to fight this. Just like we've seen more pokie machines throughout this beautiful country of New Zealand in our poorer communities where there's the most vulnerable. Do they need any more dope in Maryvale? I don't think so. You know, come on.
Thank you, Darryl.
Cool, thanks, Hapes.
Right. Well, right, so going on with the rest of the agenda, and Chairperson's report, acceptance of late items. Any late items? Okay. Any confidential business to be transferred into the open? Any change to the order of business? Okay, so we'll go on to the confirmation of minutes for a start, and then after that we go on to the recommendations from other committees. But we'll do the confirmation of minutes first, page 7, and it's Council 16th of April. Anybody got any queries? Councillor Robson.
Page 2 of the minutes, page 9 of the agenda, we have Public Forum Susie Edmonds, Bella Vista Subdivision. We have Sam Bayliss in support. I understand the gentleman's name is Sam Bailey. So if that could be, the man has enough issues with council without us insulting him by spelling his name incorrectly.
Yes, councillor Baldock.
Matter arising, not a correction. You want to do it later?
Okay, so we'll move.
Yeah. I'll do them afterwards.
With that being corrected, all in, sorry, have we got a mover and seconder? Councillor Clout and seconded by councillor Malloy. Any further discussion? All in favour say aye. Against, so that's carried. And your matter arises.
Yeah, just the second public forum on page 9, the Heather Grace request for pruning trees. That down the bottom was that there was going to be a report back to the next Project Services and Operation Committee, but we haven't yet had it. Well, we've had the meeting, but we haven't had the update. Can we just get some understanding of when that's going to come back to us?
Chair, there is a report coming on notable trees, and I've seen it. I just can't remember whether it's PSOC or policy, because it's a policy matter, but definitely it is coming and it's in the pipeline.
Further to matters arising, page 18 of the minutes, page 21 of the agenda. The resolution halfway down the page, item E, I wondered how we're going on that framework. And the reason I ask, of course, is because I was most concerned at the time that when the report by Mr. Peterson went through the significance policy of council, the findings were regarded as a matter of low significance. I just wondered how that framework's coming along.
Through you, Your Worship, it's something that we're stitching into the Project Service and Operation Committee. It'll become a regular feature within that, so...
Yeah, if it's possible, if we could be briefed on what the, salient anchor points of that framework are, so we understand how things are being measured against that framework. The framework has some anchor points, one assumes.
We'll make a point of actually including some commentary around the framework in the PSOC committee, and obviously you'll see it follow thereafter. Yeah.
Okay, so now we'll go on to recommendations from other committees. Oh, any conflicts of interest? Should I say first? No. Recommendations from other committees. The first one is DC 40 on the draft prostitution bylaw. Now, we've gone through these at committee stage, but there may be some further points. But as the chair of the committee, did you wish to move that at all, Councillor Morris?
I've got some questions to start with, if I may, sir. On page 53 of our agenda, there's a map, and then there is a more finer detailed series of maps following. There are some inconsistencies between the map on page 53 as they relate to, say, the Papamore Beach Reserve, Nikau Crescent, etc., and the more fine-grained.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we've jumped ahead. Yeah,
sorry.
We're
yeah,
currently on the prostitution one. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll take them all separately. So, you're happy to move DC 40? Is there a seconder? Councillor Kurak, and did you want to speak to it since? Anybody else wish to speak to that matter? Okay, so we'll put that all in favour. Say aye. Against. So that's.
Sorry, abstention?
Oh, abstention from...
Yeah, I wasn't at that meeting, so I don't feel that I should.
Yeah, okay, so just note an abstention from Councillor Mason. And then the next item is the draft camping one, and so Councillor Morris, your question becomes pertinent to that one?
Yeah, so the quick question is, will those be reconciled in the final bylaw? Obviously, staff have the ability to make some minor editorial amendments.
Staff had gone through and looked at some of the maps and over the weekend, because some of these issues came up, and from the work that they've done, this is about referencing of the maps. Is that your question, or is it a different question?
It's to do with the larger map on page 53 of our agenda, which has a couple of areas in blue, permitted freedom camping. And then when you look at the more finer grained maps of the same areas, those are not mentioned.
You can go back and check that, and we can make the minor adjustments through the minor amendments.
Lee?
On reading through this, there's a couple of areas that I struggle with. This is quite fluid. There's a lot of, I believe there's still work to be done. I'd very much like to see, for example, staff work with the Motorhome Association to try and find land. And I'm not talking about us providing them with any money, but they would rent the land and set up a base there. I think it'd be a great move on our part if we were able to do that. So I don't want it to be restricted. Also, once again, this is quite fluid, and I'd very much like to say, we have here prior permission from council upon application, the chief executive may temporarily waive or modify the freedom of camping restrictions or prohibitions, which I think is great. But I wonder whether there's any way the CEO could be delegated to provide provisions for or reduce freedom camping, so that you don't have to go to a 3-year process. That the CEO has delegated authority to make any changes, and not just minor temporary ones. I don't know whether that's possible. It's too late. Probably the horse is bolted, but
I think it's difficult because, of course, in any situation such as this, you'll have a couple of different opinions and sides, and it puts the CEO in an unenviable position, but he might wish to comment. But, you know, I mean, something that perhaps he might be able to act on is there's a particular event or festival, and it might be possible to camp around that. I don't know, but I'll ask the Chief Executive his opinion.
Through the worship, look, any changes to the bylaw, major changes require public consultation, so I think it would become a fine line as to what would be a minor and major change. I'd be reluctant to, I think, take on any more responsibility for making those types of decisions, given the nature of the bylaw and the way it's applied.
are we able to, it was too late, give direction to staff to work with the Motorhome Association in terms of finding a property?
They're going to be outside the process. That would be a separate matter, not governed by the Freedom Camping Bylaw, but that would be something that could be considered under another project and services. Whether there is land, I mean, we have huge numbers of people coming wanting to use land for various things, but you never know.
Through your worship, we would be prepared to work with any organisation to find land to accommodate them if possible.
Thank you.
Got Councillor Kurak, Robson, Clout and Baldock in that order. Sorry.
I'd like to see more provision of freedom camping along the coastal strip. When you consider the demand for that area and the supply, it's certainly undersupplied, and in particular around the Papamoa area where we have reduced the number of spaces there. One submitter suggested the area it's between Stella Place and the Papamoa Holiday Park, sorry, I'm not sure what it's called, the top 10 park there. And looking at a map, there appears to be quite a large area of land that is not utilised, and I'd certainly like staff to investigate and report back around the potential to increase the provision for freedom camping in that sort of space. So would I have to move a motion for council to discuss such a consideration, or do we?
You might have to have a whole new consultation, but I'll just ask staff advice on that, because this is what it came to the committee for
So it's been to the committee, and you've obviously put out a draft, you've had submissions, you've had hearings, your deliberations, and because under the Local Government Act, a committee is unable to approve a bylaw, it has to come to council as a statutory authority. So you've got a recommendation from your policy committee. If you want to relitigate some of that, I think it would be more appropriate to refer it back to policy. Or alternatively, you could adopt this bylaw and then you could commence another review subsequently. And then you might want to go out to consultation again. So it's, we're right at the end of the process, and really this was a minor tweaking of any sort of little administrative errors. You've made your decision. You can decide to go back, but I would suggest the appropriate place to do that is to refer it back to the policy committee rather than here.
I'd like to thank the staff for their advice, because it leads to my question nicely. Are we under some time constraint to get this signed off? We have to review over within a certain period of time. We have to sign off within a certain period of time. Can we confirm what the time constraints we're working to are?
Jane to respond, because this was one of the projects that transitioned through the restructure, so I'm not up to speed with the timelines.
Under the legislation, any new bylaw, which this was new, well, the first time we made it was in 2013, you have to review it within 5 years' time, so we're up for that. But there is a 2-year grace period, and after that 2 years is up, then the bylaw is invalid. We wouldn't have one. So we're in that grace period, or we're getting close to that grace period now, that 2 year. Yeah.
Can I ask when the grace period expires?
Seven years after the bylaw was first adopted, which was in, I'm just needing to check, I think, I can get the exact date, but I think it was September 2013. So 7 years after that, so 2020.
So just for clarity, we have just over a year of the grace period to go,
Correct.
in which case,
The Chair, the other thing just to think about is that you will have an election period over there, so usually the council will close down and then loses a few months before it actually gets back into business again. So you need to take that timing. There's probably about five months in there.
and given the propensity for members in our community to call for 11 to go, it might be a very new council. So taking that into account, I would be happy, I'd like to foreshadow an amendment when the time comes, Your Worship, with regard to recommending that the new policy committee, should there be one in the next triennium, review this as a matter of urgency. I don't think this is the best bylaw we've ever passed here.
Thank you. That kind of ties in quite nicely to an email that we received over the weekend from, in fact it was a very lengthy email from a submitter, bringing up a whole lot of points about our submission process and some of the statements that were made. I just think it would take time for staff to work through that, unless staff have had a chance in the last sort of 24 hours to look at it. I'd be quite comfortable in having pushing the pause button on this, unless staff got any.
So through the Chair, most of the issues and we did look at over the weekend, but clearly it hasn't had a lot of time, most of the issues seem to relate to signage and enforcement, or issues that you did debate. As I understand, I wasn't present in the meetings, but as I understand you debated, like number of car parks, space for larger vehicles. I understand you did debate those through the deliberations process. So assuming that you've made those decisions on those matters, then the matters of enforcement and signage are things that you can do subsequent to approving a bylaw. They are operation and implementation issues rather than wording changes in the bylaw itself.
Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I have some sympathy for what Councillor Robson's proposing, but not into the next triennium, but rather that we might just send it back to the policy committee and do a little bit more work on it and still finish it this triennium. Because I don't think there are many of the substantive issues that need to be addressed, but I think there is a need for a little working group to go through some of the issues that's been raised by Mr. Phillipson. So we sort of need to know that first before I talk about some of the issues that I think can be tweaked at this late stage or can be recommended into into a working group that can deal with stuff that isn't based on the thing. I did a bit of a run around this morning and looked at some areas which I think highlight some of his concerns. But in general, I think the bylaw could be passed today. But if we had a working group that went and worked on some of the signage issues and other things, with the exception of maybe one or two things. So.
Yep. Well, that could be considered, or we let it lie on the table and go back, but I guess a direction would be better. Can I, just before you do that, I did want to ask the Chair of Policy if you had an opinion on this particular topic, or do you think that would be a valuable move?
As chair, I am the committee servant, so I will take the instruction from the committee members who, actually, funnily enough, they look quite familiar around this table as well. But I think what I would say, Mr. Chair, is I think that it is very important that when members come to a committee meeting that they read the agenda, that they understand the agenda, and that they are prepared to contribute during deliberations. And so that will prevent the situation which is unfolding today, in my view, sir. I think that if members treat a committee meeting with some with the level of seriousness that it requires when making bylaws, I think that we should be able to deal with these matters mostly on the day. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll entertain a...
Can I just make a comment? I think some of the things addressed in Mr. Phillipson's email are matters that were raised at the committee meeting, and the questions raised were relevant questions, and the answers given by staff were not clear. There was many things where we didn't know for sure, we answered back. And I think it's around that now that there is still uncertainty about whether we've made the right decisions, at least for myself. Any suggestion that we participated without being abreast of the information is a little bit unreal, really. So that's the issues. There's a whole lot of things here. The first thing is, staff incorrectly told the meeting that freedom camping was permitted along Maranui Street, Papamoa Beach Road, on the reserve side of the road. In fact, the camping is prohibited here as per TCC bylaw, as this area has a 60-kilometre allowance. Now, we need to clarify those things, because one of the things I'm concerned about in our friendly city kind of reputation is that most of the cuts are in Papamoa and along the beach and along the mount side of things where we seem to be shutting the door. And I think that's unfortunate, because that is a place where many would rather be. They come here because of the ocean, the harbour and so on.
Entertain a resolution, and it would seem to me, if I'm reading the meeting right, that you would like to go back to the policy committee for just a little bit further investigation.
Well, I'll so move.
Okay, so in that case, we need to put it in words. I'll just see if I can get help with that.
I'll simply move that it be referred back to the policy committee for revision as quickly as possible. That's sufficient from staff.
Can we suspend standing orders for a small period of time, Your Worship? Just suspend standing orders so that one can speak sort of freely in here. Is that possible? Okay, thank you. I would like to see a little bit more in the motion than just refer it back to the policy committee. I think we need to give clearer direction than that. I think the idea of having a working group look at it makes some sense. It's not unusual for this council to do that. We did it recently with regard to the Mount Maunganui Cricket Club, and I hope that committee's working hard. And also, I think staff need to be clear of what direction is, like what the likely impact and impost on staff resource, time, claims, requirements, etc. So I'd like us to be a little bit clearer if that's possible. I don't know how the mover feels about that.
Well, I'm always happy to make things clear. So yes, if it's to establish, a small working group and be able to present, just establish a small working group. I don't think it's going to take long. We're going to jump in a wagon, get round, with staff, have a look at the situation, come back and make some recommendation to policy committee and see where we go from there.
Could we adjourn for 5 minutes while something is drafted that captures that accurately?
Okay, we'll just adjourn for 5 minutes, but don't disappear out of the room, please. We'll just want to get this wording right as quickly as we can. So. Bring the meeting to order again, or reconvene. Are we underway again?
Through the chair, I have a question, if I may. To the staff, I guess, but legislatively, is it possible, would it be possible for us to separate freedom camping, as we all commonly know it, to, you know, self-contained mobile homes? Because it seems to me to be an absolute nonsense that somebody who's sleeping in a van somewhere where they possibly shouldn't, who doesn't have any toilet facilities or washing facilities and is nowhere near a toilet, is treated the same way as someone who's got a self-contained van that's potentially worth anything between $50,000 and $300,000, with all the amenities that you've got at home in that vehicle, and not needing anything else. To treat them the same seems an absolute nonsense. I don't know whether we can legislatively differentiate.
Through the chair, it's my understanding that our freedom camping bylaw only allows self-contained vehicles to park overnight. So if you're in say a van that has no toilet facilities, you're actually not allowed to stay there overnight. So it already does.
Freedom camping has been right across the board, all of those vehicles.
No, the bylaw, I'm just checking with staff because I haven't been involved with this for a little while, but the bylaw only allows vehicles that are self-contained, that has self-contained certification to park overnight. A vehicle that's not self-contained is not legally under our bylaw allowed to stay overnight with people sleeping in it. All right? Yeah, staff are nodding, so got their own.
Okay, so Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, but the definition of freedom camping under the legislation is where it gets messy, right? But there isn't that distinction. I can read it for you. It was in that Mr. Phillipson's thing. So I'm suggesting that we just do this after discussion with the staff, and I've discussed it with my seconder, that we do pass the bylaw, but we have establishes an informal working group of elected members to assist staff with implementation of the bylaw and report back to the Project Services and Operations Committee with recommendations by the end of August. I think that will help resolve a lot of the issues raised. We don't want to revisit, new areas and so on. And the other thing that impacted on our decision to do this was that Margaret came forward and said they just had a meeting last week where finally central government are starting to get on amending the Act as it needs to be. And so we could be having to do a new bylaw within a year or so once that's gone through Parliament, which means we can fix anything else up then. So I'd be happy with this. I think the seconder is happy with that.
So you speaking to it?
What it was, yes,
Yes.
but I'll move that if it's seconded.
So it's moved and seconded. Yep.
I was concerned about where we were heading with this today after having read some of the issues raised in that email, but also it's always been a tricky issue with this. When we passed it in 2013, there was sections of the community didn't want things anywhere near, and I'm still a bit disappointed that we're banning Marine Parade, really. I think we did have that not in the peak summertime, but it was there. And there are some areas where you wonder, is it going to be a real problem? But until central government make this distinction between self-contained vehicles and non-self-contained, we are going to have a bit of a challenge. I will lay claim to being perhaps the most travelled in a camper van, having done so through Europe and about 4 times around New Zealand in camper vans, and staying in some pretty weird places. And in the weekend I thought best to get back to it, and so we hired a camper van and spent the night at what they call the tank farm on the edge of the water there in West Haven. And I went round to Pier Z to empty my toilet and found there a really good site where people can park, whether they've got self-containment or not, for about $24 a day. But of course, as soon as they pay, they are no longer covered by the freedom camping because it has to be free. So we could set up something in the city where non-self-contained vehicles could go and park and have facilities, but it wouldn't be part of this bylaw, and it wouldn't be part of the Freedom Camping Act. So it's something we could do. It certainly serves a purpose, and it was used by a lot of people, it seemed, when I had a look at it Monday morning. But I think there is a need to address the inconsistencies in some of our signage and just the communication with the public when we say one thing and then find it's not quite accurate. I went down to Sulphur Point this morning on the way here and took some photos. There were clearly vehicles that are not self-contained parked in our prescribed parking areas, and that's a matter for enforcement, but it obviously is something that's going to continue to happen. But I think that we do want to do all we can to make this a friendly place for people who are travelling, whether tourists or whether New Zealanders in their retirement years. This is the big dream. You sell up your house, you go and move to somewhere else, we get a cheaper house, and then you pick up a camper van and you enjoy your retirement years. And of course they come here because it's a beautiful place, and it should be. We try and find the balance between them enjoying nice beachside spots, views of the harbour, lovely facilities and so on, without impacting on our residents. It's always going to be a challenge to get that balance right. So I think the working group can help, and then we'll see if we have to do a review further on rather than hold it up today.
Reserve.
I think well said, Councillor Baldock. I will support it as long as I get confirmation that consideration for additional space at the Stella Road area could be considered and reported back, if not in principle. If this wouldn't accommodate it, it brings into question how do we consider if there was a submission asking for perhaps more space in an area and to provide that opportunity. How would we do it?
If it's a new area, you probably would have to go to a new bylaw. And more consultation. But we'll just check. I think this can do some useful tweaking, but then the view is that perhaps in a year's time, depending on what the government does with the legislation, we may be back to look at the whole thing again. But
I don't think it's a new area because it's an extension to that. I had a look on the map, and it seems you can extend that current Stella Place parking area. But if we can, some feedback.
Can I just ask Jane whether the bylaw allows amendments to locations based by council resolution, or are we required to go back to consultation?
There is a resolution. I just have to look it up, but by delegation. Sorry. Yep, so 6.2 of the proposed bylaw says council may, by publicly notified resolution, change the location of a designated area within a permitted freedom camping area and record such changes on maps in Schedule 3. So if it's within a set area that we already have, we have got delegated authority. Well, council's can make a resolution and change that without consultation, but if we thought it was a significant difference in a different area, we would have to consult.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would make a note that whoever's responsible for the agenda over lunch has working group as an agenda item, then the members can figure out who is on that working group and some brief terms of reference. Just in terms of matters relating to Stella Place, that is a special ecological area under the city plan. So my understanding is that would just result in an email from staff back saying, no, can't be done. So yeah, it's pretty clear cut. Back in the 1980s it was leased, or prior to the 1980s it was leased to the then Papamoa Motor Camp, and there were caravans on that site. In the early 80s it reverted back to dunes, and then subsequent to that a council then imposed a special ecological area overlay on that land at Stella Place. So yeah, I don't think it should require too much work. Thanks.
Any other speakers? Councillor Robson?
Yeah, I find myself in a situation of supporting the motion, but not all the sentiments expressed by the mover. And often one comes to that. For me, this is a classic example of a poorly drafted piece of central government legislation. It's quite a wicked problem, and that's not a reference to the branding of a particular name of camper. I'm not sponsored. Clarity, I think, is the issue we're seeking here. Clarity for those people that do avail themselves of the privileges of this act in our city. They deserve clarity about what they can and can't do, and they also deserve some understanding of how misunderstandings will be corrected, how transgressions will be punished, how we will enforce what we do. For the record, I'm not a fan. This argument that people make frequently that with their 6-figure, 7-meter long, self-contained mobile apartment block, they can't afford to pay camping ground fees. I just can't do the math on that. The numbers don't stack for me. The irony, I think, is those people that do struggle to afford camping grounds are the very people that can't afford a self-contained vehicle, and therefore, you know, we're blocked. Actually, this is a bit like, I don't know, draft cannabis legislation. You know, it's more complex than some people would have us believe. But I think getting clarity is really, really important, and I look forward to the government sorting its act out so that the next bylaw we pass actually sits with inside, and I'll use the word I've already used, a framework with rational anchor points. This one doesn't.
Yeah, I wasn't at the original 7th May meeting, so I will abstain again on this. Although after reading John Phillipson's email, I certainly feel like I was at the meeting. It was very thorough. But it's just an interesting observation that we have got, we're probably, without that email, we probably would have gone ahead and gone, and ticked this off today. And it just worries me a little bit that on the basis of an email sort of the day before the meeting or a weekend before, now we're suddenly redrafting policy. I think we should, in principle, we should always seek to, we've gone through the consultation, we should stick to our knitting, and the community should understand that as well. So there's some issues around that, I think it's important that we have confidence in our decisions, and we don't stray off on the basis of additional emails in future. But let's get this right when we do get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. I support the resolution on the table, but I would like it noted that I am opposed to prohibiting freedom camping at the Papamoa Domain, please.
That's fine. Okay, right of reply, Councillor Loy first.
Yeah, I certainly had some questions about this during the debate or the discussion, and I still do now. I look forward to having another look at it in a few years' time, but first of all, I have to get through the hurdle of September, which is not very likely. September, October. Yeah. So yes, we'll support, but I don't think we're as friendly as we could be, and I'd like to see that changed.
Councillor Bullock, right of reply.
I think we can get it through this triennium, and I think we should take the offered help of those from the Camper Motorhome Association who have really engaged in this process right through and have been not entirely self-interested. They've been offering some good suggestions and solutions to some things, pointing out some things we need to address. So I certainly will be putting my name forward to be in this informal working group with staff. We've done it before. We did it when we decided to tighten up on the regulations and tighten up on enforcement. We had the similar sort of arrangement. I think it was Councillor Mason and Councillor Brown and myself. And I think we can do it pretty quickly and look into it. There is obviously a challenge for people moving around the country in huge buses that may fall into the description that Councillor Robson talks about, a moving apartment. You just can't pull one of those into town and hope you can park somewhere and stay there. But most of the movement is, and you can tell when you go to the rental car companies in Auckland, see acres and acres of land parked with camper, what you call a camper van or a motorhome. They're 6 to 7 metres in length. They accommodate 2 to 6 people, and they wouldn't be there if we didn't have huge numbers of tourists coming to the city and renting those. And they're not cheap to rent because they are self-contained. They have all the facilities on board that are necessary, and those are the ones I think that can be accommodated into our normal parking areas, our normal parks, without a great loss of amenity to any of our residents. Those who have larger vehicles have got to pursue the locations that the Campervan Association actually seek out for them and set up. So this is what we'll look into anyway. I thank members for their support to take it through.
Okay, so I'll put that. All in favour say aye. Against, and that's carried with an abstention from Councillor Mason, to be noted. Thank you. Trade waste bylaw. So that's moved by the chairman, Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Kurak. Any discussion? So I'll put that. All in favour say aye. Against, so that's carried. Oh, abstention too? Yep. Abstention, Councillor Mason. And then,
Excuse me, Your Worship, do you think this would be a good time for a short break? Because this could take a while.
we'll have our, yeah, no, that does, yeah, it's ideal midpoint. 15-minute break and resuming again at 10 to 11.